It was the kind of sentence that doesn't just sting for a moment, it lingers, digs into your chest, and makes a home there. Mom, you can't come to the wedding. You're too ugly. People will talk. Harper froze. For a second, she wasn't sure she had heard her son right. Her mind tried to fill in a kinder version, a softer explanation, but no, those were the exact words Oliver had used. She saw the slight shift in his eyes, like he knew it was cruel but somehow felt justified. They stood in her small kitchen, the smell of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. Harper's hands were still wrapped around her mug, her knuckles white. She didn't respond at first, she couldn't. The boy she had raised alone since he was 4, the boy she had worked double shifts for so he could have piano lessons and summer camp, was now telling her she wasn't good enough to stand by him on the most important day of his life. "Oliver, you don't mean that," she said finally, her voice trembling. He avoided her gaze. "It's not personal. It's just, the pictures, the guests, the whole vibe. Camila's family is, well, they care about appearances. It's better if you just, sit this one out. Not personal." Harper felt the words scrape across her heart. She'd heard versions of that phrase before, in different jobs, different situations. But coming from her son, it felt like someone had pulled the floor out from under her. She wasn't glamorous, never had been. Life had been about survival, not beauty. Her auburn hair was now streaked with gray, her skin bore the lines of laughter and struggle, and her hands were rough from years of cleaning houses and working in a grocery store bakery. She had never worn designer clothes, never had the luxury of spa days. But she had always thought love, especially a child's love, wasn't based on appearances. Apparently, she'd been wrong. Oliver didn't stay long. He mumbled something about needing to run and left, his cologne lingering in the doorway after the door clicked shut. Harper sank into her chair, staring at the chipped paint on her kitchen wall. The wedding invitation lay on the table, still unopened. She couldn't bring herself to look at it. Her phone buzzed. It was her cousin, Melanie. "You sound off," Melanie said immediately. "What's wrong?" Harper hesitated. She didn't want to say it out loud, not because she was ashamed, but because once spoken, it would become too real. Finally, she whispered, "Oliver doesn't want me at his wedding." He said, "I'm too ugly." There was a pause, followed by an incredulous, "He said what?" "Harper, that is not okay. That boy must have lost his mind. After everything you've done for him." Harper gave a weak laugh. "I'm not going to fight him on it. It's his day. If he doesn't want me there, I'll stay home." But Melanie wasn't buying it. "No. This is not about his day. This is about respect. You are the reason he has a life to celebrate. If he can't see that, maybe he needs a reminder." Later that night, Harper lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The hurt sat heavy in her chest, but underneath it, something else was stirring. A flicker of defiance. Maybe she wouldn't stay home. Not to start a scene, but to prove something. To Oliver, to Camila's family, to herself. She didn't need anyone's approval to walk into that room with her head high. She didn't know exactly how yet, but she knew she wasn't going to let his words be the last word. The next morning, Harper pulled an old shoebox from the back of her closet. Inside was her emergency fund, money she'd saved over years by skipping small luxuries, taking extra shifts. She counted it. It wasn't much, but it would be enough to make a change. She called Melanie. "You still know that makeup artist who did your photo shoot?" Melanie's voice brightened. "Are you thinking what I think you're thinking?" "I'm thinking I'm tired of hiding," Harper replied. "And I'm not going to let anyone, especially my own son, tell me I'm not worthy of being seen." That afternoon, they drove into the city. Harper sat nervously in the salon chair as a stylist named Tessa studied her like an artist staring at a blank canvas. "We're going to bring out your fire," Tessa said with a smile. 2 hours later, Harper hardly recognized the woman staring back from the mirror. Her hair had been shaped into soft waves, the silver strands blended into warm, rich tones that lit up her eyes. Her face looked brighter, not just from the makeup, but from the hint of confidence creeping back in. "This isn't about changing you," Tessa said as she finished. "It's about showing the world what's been there all along." From there, Melanie whisked her into a boutique. Harper almost balked at the prices, but Melanie insisted this was an investment. They found a midnight blue dress that hugged her in all the right places without being flashy, paired with a silver pendant necklace that reminded Harper of the moonlight over the lake near her childhood home. By the time they were done, Harper felt different. Not younger. Not someone else entirely. But herself, seen in a way she hadn't been in decades. Still, her heart thudded when she thought about Oliver's face if she showed up. 3 days later, the wedding day came. Harper stood before her mirror, taking in the reflection, the woman who had weathered storms, sacrificed endlessly, and still stood tall. She grabbed her small clutch bag, straightened her shoulders, and walked out the door. She didn't have an invitation. But she was going. The wedding venue was an elegant vineyard just outside the city, all white drapes, crystal chandeliers, and manicured gardens. Harper's old sedan looked almost out of place in the gravel parking lot, tucked between sleek black sedans and imported sports cars. She turned off the engine and sat for a moment, her hands gripping the steering wheel. She could leave. She could drive home and pretend she never tried. But something inside her refused to shrink back. She had been invisible for too long, she wasn't going to be invisible today. Harper stepped out of the car, her heels clicking against the gravel. The early afternoon sun caught in her hair, making the warm tones shimmer. She could feel eyes turning toward her as she walked toward the venue gates, not out of pity, but out of curiosity. A woman in a black dress, holding a clipboard, stepped in her path. "I'm sorry, do you have an invitation?" Harper met her gaze steadily. "I'm Oliver's mother." The woman hesitated, scanning the guest list. "I wasn't told you'd be attending." "That makes 2 of us," Harper replied evenly, then stepped past her before the woman could object. Inside, the courtyard buzzed with conversation and clinking glasses. Guests in designer suits and gowns laughed under strings of fairy lights. Harper spotted Oliver near the altar, speaking with his groomsmen. He looked handsome in his tailored suit, but when his eyes landed on her, his expression froze. "Mom. What are you doing here?" he hissed when he hurried over. "Attending my son's wedding," Harper said, her voice calm but firm. "I told you." "Yes, you did. And I heard you. I also decided you were wrong." She smiled faintly, not breaking eye contact. Oliver looked around, as if worried people were watching. And they were. Harper noticed the sideways glances, the whispers. But she also noticed something else, the way those whispers weren't cruel. If anything, people seemed intrigued. Before Oliver could reply, a tall man in a charcoal suit approached them. His hair was graying at the temples, his posture straight and confident. "Oliver, aren't you going to introduce me to your mother?" Oliver faltered. Mom, this is Charles Moreno. Camila's father." Mr. Moreno smiled warmly and extended his hand to Harper. "It's an honor to meet you. We've heard a lot about you." Harper shook his hand, still maintaining her poise. "Hopefully some of it was good." "All of it," he said with a grin. "And may I just say, you look radiant today." Something in Oliver's face shifted, a flicker of discomfort. Harper wasn't sure if it was embarrassment, regret, or something else entirely. The ceremony began soon after. Harper took a seat near the back, content to observe quietly. She watched Oliver exchange vows with Camila, saw the joy in their faces, and despite the sting of the past week, she felt a swell of love for her son. It wasn't until the reception that things truly began to change. During dinner, the DJ announced that family members were welcome to say a few words. Harper hadn't planned to speak. But when she saw the microphone sitting there, unattended, something inside her urged her forward. The room fell silent as she stood, her heels clicking softly on the wooden floor. Oliver's eyes widened. Camila's brows knit in curiosity. Harper took the microphone and glanced around the room. Good evening. For those who don't know me, I'm Harper Reynolds, Oliver's mother. I wasn't originally going to be here tonight. In fact, I was told it might be better if I didn't come. But I decided that a mother should never be absent from her son's wedding unless she chooses to be. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Harper continued, her voice steady. I'm not here to embarrass anyone. I'm here because I want to tell you something about the man sitting over there at that table. When Oliver was 8, he got into a fight at school. Not because he was being bad, but because another boy was making fun of a girl's second-hand shoes. Oliver told me later, no one should feel small just because they don't have nice things. She paused, her gaze landing on her son. That's the boy I raised. The boy who knew kindness was more important than appearances. The room was still. Oliver's jaw tightened, his eyes flickering with something unreadable. Harper smiled faintly. Life changes us. Sometimes, it makes us forget the lessons we once knew. But I believe, with all my heart, that the man I raised is still in there. And I'm proud to be here today, not because I fit anyone's idea of picture perfect, but because love doesn't need perfection to be real. She handed the microphone back and walked off the floor, her head high. By the time she reached her seat, something unexpected happened, people started clapping. Not polite, awkward claps, but genuine applause. And then she saw Oliver stand up. Oliver's chair scraped against the wooden floor as he stood, his face pale but his eyes locked on his mother. For a few seconds, he didn't say anything, he just stood there, the room still buzzing from the applause. Then, slowly, he began to walk toward her. Harper's pulse quickened. She didn't know if he was angry, embarrassed, or about to ask her to leave. But when he stopped in front of her, the room went quiet again. Mom, his voice cracked slightly. I owe you an apology. No, more than that. I owe you the truth. I didn't tell you not to come because of how you look. I told you because I was ashamed of myself. A murmur ran through the crowd. Harper tilted her head slightly, unsure what he meant. Oliver took a deep breath. Camila's family comes from a lot of money. They're used to a certain lifestyle, country clubs, charity galas, vacation homes. And I've been trying to fit into their world. Somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that the only way to do that was to distance myself from where I came from. From you. Harper's throat tightened, but she stayed quiet, letting him speak. I told myself it was about appearances, but the truth is, you've always been the most beautiful person in the room. I was just too scared of being judged to admit it. And that fear made me say something unforgivable. He turned, looking around at the guests. You want to know who this woman is? This is the woman who worked 12-hour shifts on her feet so I could go to college. The woman who stayed up until 2 in the morning sewing a suit from scratch because we couldn't afford to rent one for prom. The woman who made sure I never missed a meal, even when she went without. Harper's eyes brimmed with tears. Oliver turned back to her. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. And I don't care what anyone here thinks, if you're not in my wedding photos, it won't feel like my wedding at all. Will you, please come sit at the family table? For a long moment, Harper didn't move. The silence in the room was thick, everyone waiting. Then, she slowly rose to her feet. Yes, she said simply. The crowd erupted in applause again, but this time Harper barely heard it, her focus was on her son's arms wrapping tightly around her. It was a hug that said more than words ever could. When they pulled apart, Harper caught sight of Camila, who was watching with glassy eyes. She stepped forward and took Harper's hands. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. "I should have spoken up when Oliver told me, but I was afraid of starting a fight. I'm glad you came. I want you to know, you belong here." The rest of the evening shifted in a way Harper hadn't expected. Guests came up to her to compliment her dress, to tell her how touching her speech was, to ask about the stories Oliver had hinted at. Mr. Moreno even insisted she join him for a dance, twirling her across the floor under the warm glow of string lights. Later, as the photographer gathered the family for pictures, Harper stood beside her son. He leaned down and whispered, "I'll never make you feel small again." And Harper, smiling through tears, replied, "You never could, unless I let you." The photos that night would capture many things: laughter, joy, love. But for Harper, the real memory was something no camera could hold, the quiet certainty that she had walked into that vineyard not just to witness a wedding, but to reclaim her place in her son's life. And she had.